You're listening to the Create A Proneur Podcast, episode 11. And today's episode, I'm sharing the 3 lessons from the first 60 days of running the podcast and how you can apply them to every project you create. So, stay tuned. Hello, my name is Rodney Washington, author, artist, and entrepreneur, and I'm passionate about helping creatives just like you do what lights you up and make a comfortable living while doing it. Each week, I'll be sharing timely business growth, marketing, and mindset hacks and interviews with courageous creative entrepreneurs to inspire you to get paid for your creativity. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and enjoy today's show. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by my free audio, book, and PDF, Get Paid for Your Creativity, 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts and Create True Security for Yourself. To get your hands on a copy of the free audiobook and PDF, go to getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57ways-gift. Depending on when you listen to this, I launched the Create A Proneur podcast a few days shy of 2 months ago, April the 9th, 2019. And in this episode, I want to break down my top 3 lessons I've learned from launching the show and how they can affect every project that you create. Lesson 1. Pick a project you're willing to commit to for at least the next 5 years. Now, 5 years might seem like a long period of commitment. And please hear me on this. I'm certain that if I'm still producing the podcast 5 years into the future, and for the record, that date will be April the 9th, 2024, I'm pretty clear that the show, and more importantly, how I'm producing it, won't be the same as it is now. Now, for example, I project I'll be publishing more than 1 episode per week. As a matter of fact, I'm planning to start dropping occasional bonus episodes in the next quarter of this year, 2019, quarter 2 of 2019. Now, do I have plans to do a daily show? Well, probably not, but I can definitely see at least 2 episodes a week on the horizon, and that will be coming pretty much on a regular basis in the near future. My point about having a 5-year vision is that you can avoid picking a project that doesn't bring you joy or help you fulfill a larger vision. Let me explain. If I can't see myself doing something for at least 5 years, regardless if I do it or not, but if I can't see myself doing something for at least 5 years, then it may not be the project for me. And I'm suggesting the same for you. Now, that's not to say that you won't experience, drudge work on your journey, or that every day is going to be, absolutely wonderful as you're doing the project, as you're working through the day-to-day of accomplishing what it is that you want to do. It's not to say that every day is going to be rainbows and kittens, so to speak. But here is the reason why I feel, in my experience, a 5-year vision is so important. Your 5-year dictates your 1 year, your 2-year, your 3-year, your 4-year plans. So if I see myself having a 5-year vision for the podcast, then that dictates what I will do in year 1 and in year 2 and in year 3. And it's the same I'm suggesting for you. Because when you have a clear 5-year vision, again, your year-by-year milestone breakdown helps to dictate your monthly and your daily actions. For me, I can tell you now, at the time I'm recording this, that my 2 to 3 year vision is to write and publish a book of the same title of this podcast. And within 5 years, my 5-year vision is to be running an online and in-person location or travel-based experience program that supports creatives like yourself to express yourself and free yourself from the shackles of the starving artist mentality to running your own thriving businesses based on your creativity. That's my larger 5-year vision. My 5-year vision then is rooted as far as the podcast goes, is rooted in helping to do 2 things: serve as a connector for creative entrepreneurs and an audience builder for my educational platform and my brand, which allows me to fully express myself as I go through the next 5 years. So again, take it back to asking yourself, what do you want 5 years from now? Or what is it that you feel you want to do, and then see if you can see yourself doing it for the next 5 years, and then step back into your 1 year, 2 year, and so forth plan. Again, stick with the 1 year for a moment and think back to your 1 month, 1 day, 1 week plans, because all of that dictates where the months and the years will go moving forward. All right, so moving on to lesson 2 from running the podcast. Consistency is everything. This podcast is not my first foray into the podcasting game. As a matter of fact, I launched another podcast 6 years ago. It's called the Get Paid for Your Creativity podcast. And I will say right now, my deepest regret is that I didn't stay with the show. I can honestly look back on it and say, to be point blank about it, I just didn't really have a clear vision, not just for the show, but for my life and how everything would affect my life. I didn't have a vision for it. So the show felt more like a project that I was dabbling with than what I hoped it to be, which I would for this show I hope to be, is a game changer that would support a larger purpose. So before I decided to get back into the podcasting game again with this show, the first thing I had to do before I even purchased my microphone and created the artwork for the album cover that you see on iTunes or whatever, all of those things, before I did any of that, before I got into writing out what the topics were going to be and how I was going to, my publishing date and how many episodes I was going to do and selecting the music that you listen to in the intro of this podcast, before I did any of those things, I first had to really check in with myself. And it took me some time. I'm not going to say this happened overnight, but I had to really check in with myself to make sure that this time I was committed to being consistent. Producing at least one weekly episode, is a non-negotiable. So no matter what life throws my way in the coming months and years moving forward, at minimum, I have to commit to being able to produce and publish at least one weekly episode. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, my plan is to start adding another episode, which I'm now going to label as bonus episodes, and I'm going to pepper those in from time to time. But at minimum, I will publish at least one weekly episode. Now, even as I say that out loud in the form of this recording that you're listening to now, even saying it out loud makes me feel more committed, because I know that my commitment will be rewarded, and not just in the present, but in the future. So before you launch your next project, ask yourself, what am I committed to doing consistently? I'll share some examples. If it's like me, it could be a podcast. Will you commit to doing it, producing a show once a week? If it's writing a blog post for your blog, can you commit to writing one new post once a month, maybe twice a month? But what can you know for a fact that's a non-negotiable that you can commit to? If you're writing a book, can you start with maybe writing 500 words a day of your book, your new book? Or if you're a photographer, can you take a new photograph and post it to Facebook, a new photograph or a new photograph to Facebook or Instagram every single day? What you decide is not the point. The fact is that you do make a choice, you do make a decision, and that you commit to it, because again, consistency is everything. Now, I'm going to give you one last tip before moving on to my last lesson. Get clear on how you'll be able to keep your commitment when life inevitably gets in the way. Now, for me, in my example, my commitment to publishing a weekly podcast, I can record a podcast episode on my iPhone if I'm away, say, from my home studio. Maybe I'm traveling. I get an idea for a show, and again, I'm not near my computer. I can still record an episode on my iPhone. I haven't done that yet, but I know that's a possibility for me to be able to do and stay with my commitment. Another thing that I can do to make sure I stay on my commitment is I can batch process several episodes ahead of time just in case I am traveling, or if something else comes up, or I have another project that I have to spend some focused time on, and I don't have the time to actually do an episode each week. I can batch process two, three, four, or more episodes and have those banked up so that each week I stay with my commitment. Okay? So once you get clear on what that commitment is going to be, again, start thinking, how can I already think in your mind, how can I troubleshoot, if you will, any potential issues that will inevitably come up? Life happens. People get sick. You might get, sick. You might have to do something different. Something may change. But if you are committed to what you have said you're committed to with consistency, you will already have contingency plans in place to be able to keep yourself committed to what you said you're going to do consistently. Whatever arrangements for me personally I choose to make, I need to ensure that I maintain my commitment. That is more important to me. It's very important that I'm consistent to my word that I will do this. It's said that keeping your word to yourself when no one is watching is the epitome or the definition of integrity. So I want to be in integrity. And to do that, I have to make choices that will help me keep my word. If I can't trust myself, how can I expect anyone else to trust me? And my third and final lesson is on the subject of choice is everything is a choice. So choose well. When I chose to launch the podcast, I did so because I love to teach and obviously I love to talk. Now, I'm currently reading what I consider to be a well thought out book titled Choose by Ryan Levesque. And I will have the link to how to learn more about this book in a moment inside the show notes, which I'll just tell you now is going to be at getpaidforyourcreativity.com/011 for episode 11. Now, what I choose, first I want to start just talking a little bit about the book, and I'm going to go more into this book actually in a future episode of the podcast. So I just want to introduce this to you in lesson 3, because this to me is what helped me to get the podcast going. I not only chose to do a podcast, but I had to get clear about why I was choosing to do it. And again, when I recently received Ryan's book and started reading it last weekend, I thought this really confirms and solidifies why I'm doing this, my choice in doing this. And I felt it was too important not to at least introduce you to it. And then we will talk about it more. I'll share more about it in a future episode. First thing I want to say about the book Choose. To me, this is not your typical business book, but not one of those boring, stodgy, I've heard this 1,000 times before types of books on entrepreneurship. Similar to the name, its subject focuses on figuring out what you're passionate about, but not just that. It's much more than that. You're then looking at all the elements that help you take what you've decided you want to do, but look at it from the perspective of the market that will potentially purchase from you. As creative entrepreneurs, we have this delicate dance between our talent, our natural gifts and natural abilities, the things we like to do, the things we do to express ourselves, and how to match that to an audience and a market that actually wants to purchase things from us. Sometimes the passion can override the intel. And let me explain. If I have a passion for something that, let's just say a form of photography, because photography was what I did in my last business. And say I have a passion for a certain subject matter. And I spend all my time taking photographs of this subject matter, and it's something that I just really love and really enjoy. And it's, let's make it more concrete. Let's say flowers or landscape photography, because I do love outdoor photography and travel and landscape in particular. That's one of the areas I personally love to do to express myself. And let's say that I produce a body of work, let's say a series of prints, that I want to sell. And again, this is my passion. This is something that I love to do, how I love to express myself. I've built up this body of work. I put it out, get it out there in the world. Maybe I get it into some businesses and get some eyeballs on it. Maybe I have a website with some images and stuff on there. And that's kind of it. Maybe I do an art fair here and there, and I've got some business cards or what have you. But that's kind of the extent of what I'm doing. And perhaps I haven't really connected to a market that really is in the market for the particular body of work that I've created, or I'm not positioning it in a way that it attracts the audience that would appreciate that body of work and is willing to pay for it. Let's say that if that's an example of a business that I maybe have chosen a way to express myself creatively and turn it into a business, but I'm having a difficult time getting sales. It can be a myriad of reasons why that particular business may not go over as well for me. But for someone else, it could be very different. But for me, I could say maybe that didn't work as well for me. And from that, I could become discouraged and say, well, this is just a nice hobby, but I can't really make any money doing this, so I'm going to let this go. And that's a choice. Goes back to the word choose. It's a choice. But then but the other option that I have is this. And I'm not saying that people can't sell landscape photography. People sell probably, I'm sure, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of, maybe even millions of dollars of landscape prints. Look at someone like an Ansel Adams, for an example. It can be done. What I love about the book Choose is that what Ryan has done with the book is that he gets us to think about the market, the audience, the people who would want to purchase what we have to offer. The issue that a lot of us as creatives have is that we are so married to our passion and the thing that we love to do to express ourselves. Some struggle with connecting it to a buyer, a market who actually wants the thing that we are creating. So we might put it out there in the ways that we think is the way it should be put out there. Really, in a lot of respects, is throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping something sticks, as opposed to doing the research to find the audience that would be interested in this particular type of, in this example here, this particular type of landscape photography. So it might mean that instead of just putting some prints up on a website and maybe going to like a local business that you can, maybe hang some things on a wall, it might mean that you need to connect your work to a particular publication or the topic of your work to a particular cause. Maybe if there's an environmental issue that is important to the area that your work seems to express, you might work to try to get yourself written up in a particular magazine. With a story about you and how you developed this body of work and how maybe a percentage of the proceeds of this work will go to a particular charity, as an example. That could be a way to then bring attention to your work, which then would lead to the website and so on and so forth. Maybe you could be interviewed on podcasts around creativity, business. You could be interviewed on, I'm sure there's photography related podcasts, travel related podcasts, lifestyle related podcasts. Those are just a few examples. These are things that I want to make sure that I really talk about in this context because, again, a lot of times creatives can fall short of that, stretching ourselves to think beyond what we might think we know that's right in front of us. And what I like about what I'm reading so far, I've not finished the book yet, so I'm going to talk about Ryan's book more in a future episode, as I said a moment ago. But what I like about the research part of things is getting out there and finding who would be an ideal market for this particular thing that I'm doing and getting clear about that before we marry ourselves too much to a passion or an idea, before we've verified that there is a hungry market that wants to purchase whatever this is that we are selling. One thing I do want to make sure that I share as a caveat to the book Choose is Ryan's propensity or his natural leaning is towards creating information based, educational based products and services as a supplement to, say, a product based business. So, using a landscape photographer as an example, one of the things that could be a potential profit option for me, or if I wanted to do that, I should say, would be if I wanted to create my own workshops or my own seminars or something where people could, I could teach them what I do, either in person or preferably online. So having an information, a teaching, educational based proponent to your component of your business, no matter whatever it is that you're selling, is an additional profit center that you could have. And what Ryan teaches or shows you how to do is to research the validity of that market before you decide to throw all in and say, this is what I'm going to do. So, with that in mind, looking at it from an educational perspective, let's say that you are a wonderful watercolor artist. You could consider creating online courses teaching watercolor painting. You could do consulting with individual people via Skype, doing one-on-one. They can be on camera, show you what they're doing. You can coach and guide them through video camera. Same thing, you can scratch out the watercolor artist and put in, say, a food photographer. Do the same thing. You could have a course, you could have a membership site, you could have one-on-one consulting. Those options are available to you. The reason why the educational information product arena is something that he leans towards and something that I personally connect to is because, again, as I said a moment ago with starting the podcast, I love to teach. So this podcast gives me an opportunity to do that. And of course, the profit centers that I will create will also be rooted in the teaching arena, whether it's in person or online. But that's the part of my 5-year vision. The reason why he suggests having one component of your business, even if it is physical product based, is that the overhead typically can be lower with information products. The cost of startup is very minimal. And that if you can verify that there's a valid market looking for this particular product, an already established market looking for this product, those markets are actually much easier to break into as opposed to you trying to quote unquote reinvent or design a wheel from scratch. I'll share an example that Ryan shared in his book. Ryan spent many years in Southeast or in Asia. Actually, I shouldn't say Southeast Asia. I don't know. I think he was in China, Shanghai, and then he moved to Hong Kong, I believe, with his wife. He now lives in Texas. He shared a story about his wife was really enjoying the Scrabble tiles and making jewelry out of them. And when he left the company he was with in Shanghai and joined her in Hong Kong, he saw what she was doing. And he had found someone that was teaching a little ebook. I had an ebook or something. I think it was an ebook, I believe. It was an ebook on how to make Scrabble tile jewelry. And she was selling that on Etsy. So his wife was already making jewelry, so he had familiarization with what she was doing, watching her do it, and then he discovered that this person had this particular digital product on Etsy showing how to do this. Now, again, he had no experience with designing jewelry with Scrabble tiles other than his wife doing it, in front of him. So he decided, looking for a new project and something to what he calls I think it's called a passion. It's not a passion project, but there was a name for it here. I'll get it in a second. I'm trying to remember what he said. But he decided to approach it from a project, like a project test. He wasn't doubling down and going all in and saying that this is going to be my business. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And, this is my thing. He decided that I just want to see if they called it a practice business. I'm sorry. He wanted to see, can I make a practice business out of teaching people how to make jewelry out of Scrabble tiles. So what he did was he purchased this other person's product off of Etsy. And when he got it, when he downloaded it, he basically said that he thought that it was very poorly done. It had lots of typos. The grammar was not good. The pictures were horrible. It just was not a well done product. But on Etsy, it shows how many sales that this product has gotten. So he knew by the person's sales record that this product was selling. But when he physically experienced the product, he saw how poorly done it had been put together. So what he decided to do, instead of building a brand new wheel, he decided to renovate the existing wheel that already existed and make this particular product better. So he cleaned up, he did his own iteration of it. He cleaned up the grammar and the spelling. He actually went through the process of designing the jewelry himself so that he would have the tactile experience of having done it. And then what he did was he had brand new photographs taken, and he really put a lot of energy and time into designing something that was more visually stimulating and appealing and more, and just put together more professionally. It looked better. It performed better. And I believe he sold it on Etsy as well. And because he had a far superior product in terms of design and aesthetic, he actually outsold the person who already had a similar product and sold more than this other person did. Now, eventually that market, he said, dried up and he wasn't selling that product anymore. And then he got another inspiration to teach how to take care of orchids. And that became another information product which he sold very well. The point being was that he just didn't wake up one day and say, out of the blue, with no validation, I'm going to create how to make jewelry with Scrabble tiles, or I'm going to write an information product on how to take care of orchids. He went to verifying that there was market validity, that there were proven sales. People actually were buying something similar. This brings up, I think, a issue that a lot of us as creatives struggle with is I'm going to call it the obsession with being the first. What I mean by that is, of course, no one wants to be accused of copying someone. But I don't believe that there's a difference between out and out copying someone, like literally taking what they wrote or what they said word for word and claiming it as your own. Give credit where credit is due. But there is nothing wrong with improving something. And before, the ebook and the information digital thing became such a thing, and it still is to this day, you could go into any bookstore, the few that are still around, and you would see dozens of books on a single topic. So this idea that I can be the only, if someone else has written a book or done a course or created a piece of whatever, fill in the blank, I can't do that because it's already been done. And that's the number one thing, in my opinion, that kicks us in the butt and holds us back, is this idea that I've got to be the first. In many respects, especially if you're trying to make a business out of something, you really don't want to be the first, because the first is the one that basically all the learning curve happens to. You're the one that has to figure out what works in the marketplace and what doesn't. And then eventually, once you figure it out, people will then copy you in order to speed up that learning curve that you had to go through. So what I say to this, it doesn't matter if it's a book, if it's jewelry, if it's photography, if it's clothing, it's whatever it is. What I will say to you is this. We don't want to out and out copy someone, but we do want to have a twist, our own twist on something. In the case of what Ryan shared with the Etsy seller that had the book on making jewelry out of Scrabble tiles, he saw the poor quality and knew that he could do better. He didn't have more experience making Scrabble tile jewelry than this other lady did, but then we don't know what she experienced she came to it with. but he did know how to make things more user friendly, how to put more visual examples in and emphasize better quality photography, and how to make sure that things were spell checked and grammatically written grammatically. He knew how to do that. And so with that said, he was able to make a better product. Not a different product, just a better product. And that's the secret, is instead of trying to reinvent the wheel or build a wheel from scratch, take what you already have or what you already have proven is viable, and then put your spin on it, your take on it, make it better, improve it just somewhat. It doesn't even have to be dramatically different or dramatically better. It could be that for some reason you see, let's go back to an interview we did with Jane Button, who I believe was in episode number 7 of the podcast, and she talked about her knitting business that she had. It could be something as simple as doing things in different color combinations than what someone else has done. It could be about adding a feature or an applique, or maybe, for example, in the case of what Ryan's example was, perhaps this person that he basically got inspired by only had an ebook, but he was really good with video and camera and was able to make video lessons so that there were clickable links inside of the ebook that people could go to a membership area on a website and watch videos. Maybe he could adding on a Facebook group for people who made Scrabble tile jewelry. Maybe it included additional lessons that as he came up with new lessons, he could have basically created like a little membership site and charged like $4.95 a month or $9.99 a month or something like that, and gave them a different lesson each month. So it's not about necessarily making it necessarily better. It can be just about making it different and putting more thought into it and making it more valuable to the customer that you have. So again, I say all this to say is you don't want to be the first. You want to see where the market already is, what it's already responding to, hearing what the issues or the complaints or the things that they say, God, I love this, but I wish. That is I think one of the best phrases in researching a market. Whenever you see, say, a book or anything or product or anything that you're thinking about maybe going into, if you hear anyone use the phrase, I love this, but I wish, whatever's on the end of that, but I wish, could be the secret to your gold. It could be the thing that unlocks it all for you. So listen to those things that people complain about, the things that they said I love this, but I wish it had this, or I wish it came in this, or I wish they made that flavor, or I wish that they did that color, or whatever the case may be. Because again, if you can accommodate it, that could be the secret that unlocks everything for you. All right. So as I said, I'm going to be talking more about this amazing book and some of the lessons and so forth that come inside this book in a future episode. What I really want to just say is Ryan ultimately did not rely on passion solely. He didn't even have a passion for Scrabble tile jewelry. What he did see was an opportunity. He found a product in need of improvement and a fertile market already investing money in that particular product and market. And he saw an opportunity to serve that market with an even better offering. Again, sometimes we can find ourselves investing considerable amounts of time and thought into pursuing an idea or a passion without really verifying if it's worth pursuing. And that's what Choose the Book can do. It can help you choose better, choose well. So again, stay tuned for a future episode of the podcast where I'm going to share even more of my impressions and discoveries from the book and how I'm using it to create my own practice business projects moving forward. And who knows, I may be able to even score an opportunity to interview the author of the book. So just to recap, these are my top 3 lessons from my first 60 days of producing the podcast. Lesson 1. Pick a project that you're willing to commit to for at least 5 years. And then stair-step yourself back to year 1, 2, 3, and 4. From year 1, what can you do monthly? What can you do weekly? What can you do daily? Lesson 2, consistency is everything. And build in a contingency plan so that you can stay committed to consistency. It changes everything. And finally, everything is a choice, so choose well. Passion is great. You want to have that passion as a part of what you're doing, but you also need to match that passion if you want to make a business from it, from the place of verifying that there is a market out there looking to invest in your passion, in your idea. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up this week's podcast. I will be sharing more about, I said, the book in a future episode. If you would like to get the show notes and everything, including links to Ryan's book and a few other resources I have planned for you, go to getpaidforyourcreativity.com/011 for episode 11. And all the show notes will be there. And until next time, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week on the podcast. Bye-bye. We have entered the age of creative self-employment. In the new economy, people are creating true security for themselves. That's why I believe there has never been a better time in history to monetize your gifts. So if you're ready to take control of your financial and creative future, I have something for you. It's my free audio and PDF program, 57 Ways to Monetize Your Gifts and Create True Security for Yourself. And you can get that at my website, getpaidforyourcreativity.com/57 Ways Gift.